Alright, again, my name is Barnett, but I get everyone to call me Barney. It's much easier, much simpler, more memorable. I've been playing Magic for 6 years, and for 5 of those I've been a judge. Alright, so why I became a judge. So just like most of the people here, lack of judge at your LGS or local game store, support from like TO and local players. So over the year that I started and became a judge, it became very relevant that I was the only person that actually paid any attention to the nuanced rules and interactions between Magic cards. Especially during pre-releases, we would always have someone who was a long-time player, and so we just naturally looked up to him and we kind of just took him at his word if an interaction happened or something like that. But over time, I started to learn that maybe because he's played for so long, the game has changed a lot in those years. And yeah, that's pretty much it. I thought, quickly learned that this isn't the case, that if you became a judge, this would make you a better player. No, it's not correct. Just because you know the rules does not make you a better player.
It
makes it much harder.
Right? If you can't judge a TO. Love it.
And the biggest thing is that passion for Magic in general. Like, I love the game. So that really fueled my desire to be a judge, so I could essentially share my passion with the other players. And for anyone who actually hadn't played Magic before, it was a great way to teach them. So in the beginning, I was fine with staying in L1. Didn't really find it necessary to go any further than that. There were plenty of L2s in the area. We had Grand Prix trials at the time, which L1s could head judge. There were no shortage of these. There was basically one every weekend. And of course, like the other local tournaments that stores would run. Also, because I'd only been playing at, say, like the one local game store, I didn't really know of the other game stores around Brisbane. I didn't know the other TOs or any of the other players. I only knew a handful of judges. Essentially, Johnny was my mentor, and then Devin was the one that certified me in 2013. And that's basically all, and Bing as well, because I met all of them at ACE. And that's basically all I knew about the area. I hadn't met a lot of players, TOs, or anything like that. And L2 just seemed like a lot of work. Like I would go to a tournament that an L2 would head judge, and I just looked at it as like, I don't want to get involved in that work. Like I'm so much happier being in L1. And but over time, my goals changed. So first inclinations of stepping up to L2. So after some time, I actually started getting more and more experience judging Comp-RL events. My first one was very scary. Like, I was very scared to make any mistakes. And guess what? I made a bunch because I was so scared. And after that first tournament, like, it really killed my motivation to just go any further because of like that fear of having players just not rely on you, because of those first mistakes. But after judging more events, you start to learn that the players are more than willing to give you a second chance as long as you approach them correctly about it. Apologizing for your mistakes is an important skill. So if you make a wrong ruling during an event, and even if it doesn't decide the outcome of the game, or if it does, always go back and apologize to both players. it's important for the player that you gave the wrong ruling to, because the feels bad is heavy, to say the least. And it's also important for their opponent, because you don't want them to feel that they only got the win simply because of your wrong mistake, and you want to encourage them to come back to more events. You don't want them to like go away from this event and be like, okay, well, that judge is always going to rule like against me, or I'm never going to play here again because that judge got it wrong once. Okay, so always follow up on your mistakes. That was a difficult one for me to learn. Also judging in more locations, so basically just getting to know all the other stores around Brisbane. They change because business change, so some of them will get closed down, new ones will get opened up. Knowing the locations and store owners and TOs, I think is an underrated part of becoming an L2, simply because there's a lot more to learn at that point, and you're also building up a brand in a sense, because you're presenting yourself as a qualified volunteer to these store owners, and you want to give the impression that you can be depended on in the right situations, whether it be tournament related or just Magic in general. Getting to know the general Brisbane community as a whole, so like players, they make up everything about it. Getting to know each one, like Johnny, like the example given that Johnny knows most people just by first name, which is amazing because I can barely remember names at all. So if I don't remember your name, please don't be offended. I'm just terrible with names, okay? Really sorry.
That's all right, banana.
But being approachable to your Magic community is also very important. Giving the air of being comfortable with basically everyone is important. Otherwise, they're just not going to call judge. They're not going to come to you for any advice, and this will essentially lead to you just not being put on staff for any tournaments. And worst case scenario, you could just be let go from the judge program if you're just a general grump sort of thing. Around this time, I believe it was around 2016, was the judge level shake-up. So they got rid of L4s and 5s, so now we only have 1, 2s and 3s, and they got rid of GPTs, which significantly reduced the amount of tournaments at Comp REL that would happen. So it was now up to the stores and the TOs to put up tournaments, and you would have PTQs and PPTQs that only an L2 could head judge. So I found that if I wanted to continue judging at a Comp REL level, I would need to become an L2. Because that's just what I enjoy. Comp REL gives the opportunity for, yeah?
Did you also find that like you built up a real skill set in learning how to judge at CompRel, building up that authority in those situations, and that removal of GPTs and proper PTQs and moving into PPTQs that can only be judged by level 2s sort of pulled that out, and it's
yeah, exactly. Yeah. So again, it was just less opportunity to be able to judge a Comp REL, which led to experience, like trying to gain more experience at that level, became severely reduced. So when I wanted to go for L2, like this was one of the big decisions. Like I need more experience, and I wanted to do more for my community. Cool. So my first road to L2. So the requirements for L2 changed a little bit. We'll get to it in a little bit. So difficulty sitting for the test in Queensland. So even back then, we didn't have an L3 in Queensland to test. Our options were to either go down south, which costs money, and people don't have a lot of money these days. One of those people is me. There was the option of doing the test over Skype, but I felt that was really impersonal, and for my own personal experience, I wanted to be face-to-face with my tester in person, so I could get the maximum amount of feedback. Finding a mentor. Thankfully, Chris was my mentor for this first road. He's still my mentor for my second one. Finding a mentor who will not only sacrifice their time, but their patience for you is very difficult, so thank you, Chris. And in order to do my test for L2, I decided I wanted to do it at a Grand Prix, and specifically not as a player. So not playing in the main event, barely playing in any side events. There's more, I wanted to learn from the other judges judging the event. I did apply for Grand Prix Sydney. I just wasn't accepted because of lack of experience, and there's a whole bit. I'll get to that a little bit later. But yeah, so attending like a major tournament, but with not the express intent of being like a player, is a different environment, because it gives you much more time to not only watch how a large-scale tournament is run. It gives you an opportunity on how the judges themselves section between each other, especially when it comes to team leaders and things like that. Cool. So these are the requirements to sit the L2 test as they stand. So judge 6 sanctioned events in the previous 6 months. These can be regular REL FNMs. If you are the resident judge at your LGS, this is very easy, because as long as you attend. Yep.
Don't forget to ask the TO.
Oh, of course, yeah. Yeah.
Hey, Adrian, you put me down as a judge for next event too?
Yes. Ask the TO to put you down as the judge. Make sure that you actually judge. So, it's so like actually attend the event. I have had situations where people have put down the judge and the judge just not be there. It happens sometimes. Recommendation review. So this is why the mentor is so important. Generally, you will be judging with your mentor either during a Comp RL event, or actually at a Comp RL event, or at a judge tournament qualifier in the previous 12 months. So it gives you like a large window to get that recommendation. A judge tournament qualifier is actually very similar to a judge conference. They simply just run you through they'll have examples of of player interactions where it'll be up to you to how you handle a situation. They'll review you on how you handle that situation, and from that, whether or not they recommend you is up to them. Enter reviews of 2 different judges into the Judge Center in the previous 12 months. So judge reviews, this is an excellent way to give feedback to other judges. You don't necessarily have to be judging that event with that judge to give them feedback. You could be a player and you just happen to notice, you just happen to be a player and you want to review how the head judge or any of the floor judges or judges there how they did. But you need to do at least 2 of these with different judges. Okay. An article or conference report or a written tournament report from an event with multiple judges in the previous 12 months. So something like this. There is a tournament report section in Judge Center where you can put your report up, and this is a good way to evaluate how you approach the tournament, how you approach your judge conference experience in general, and it's also a good way to get feedback from other judges who read it. And what I like to do is I like to put down like little nuanced interactions that I had, interactions that may not be so blasé on the surface, just so I can get other judges' opinions on if I did something correctly, especially approaching players or handling unsportsmanlike conduct infractions, like minor ones. Generally, everyone's in agreement on everything that's major, but it's more like minor or tournament errors are a big one as well. How we approach this and getting different perspectives is all part of just learning. A score of 70% on an L2 practice exam in the previous 12 months. Fairly self-explanatory. They have the practice test on the Judge Center, get at least 70%. My first time, I got 85%. And I thought this was good enough to sit the L2. We'll get to that. I was feeling confident at this point that I would pass the L2 test. But, as some of you may know, I did actually fail that first time. So, failure and learning. So, 2016, I set the test and I don't know if I can actually say, let's just say I failed. I got enough questions wrong that I failed. And the tester will go through your exam with you. I can't speak about the exam. You're expressly told not to talk about the exam with anyone. Just know that it is very difficult. It is much, much more difficult than your L1 exam, as it entails everything. When I mean everything, I mean everything. So, any official document released by Wizards, it'll basically cover. Okay, so, yep.
And just to make sure everyone knows that the test is also a 50-question test, 80% pass mark. So it is a lot more detailed and a lot harder than the L1.
Yes. Yeah. Very much so.
50 questions.
50 questions. Yeah.
How long is the exam?
It's recommended 2 hours.
Jesus.
So, but like, there's no actual time limit. They do say that if you cannot do this exam within 2 hours, you should probably go back to the slate.
Okay.
Yeah. So there really is no time limit, but if you can't do it in 2 hours, they're gonna think about it.
Yeah.
So, what areas did I fail in? IPG. The IPG over the years has changed quite a bit to cut error like infractions and include new ones, update infractions. It's very important to keep up to date with every cycle. Very important, because at the time I would read them, but I wouldn't understand them. So until I had put it into practice, that's when it became a lot more clear to me. Like, that's typically how I learn, is by putting things into practice. It's very difficult for me to learn by just reading an article and then trying to walk away and understand it completely. Why did I fail in these areas? This is a question that about just failure in general. Like, why did I fail? Did I not put in enough work? Did I not give myself enough time to prepare? There are a lot of factors. One of the big ones for me was the environment. Is very stressful. And once I realized that a lot of these questions I was getting wrong, if I wasn't able to do these in 2 hours, how could I possibly just walk up to a table and just know instantly? And how could I have done better? Basically just goes over like, the whole failure part of this.
On that question, how could I have done better? So the IPG constantly shifts. I know it's also my weakness as a judge. Is there a way we could get better at all together at keeping on top of those changes and knowing when changes are made and how we should be applying them?
Yep, great question. I would love it if every time a change got released, that we all discuss this like as a group. That way we know exactly.
L2s? This is a conversation that we'd like you to lead? Potentially?
But it's Barney's joke.
Yeah. So,
So my question was, how can we all get better at staying on top of shifts in the IPG?
All right, Toby L1, who used to be a level 5 but is currently one of level 3s, typically does a blog post with a lot of the changes to the IPG and basically what's happened in the wider Magic community and what's led them to considering or making this decision. And usually that's posted pretty close to or just before when the changes are actually active. I know a lot of you are actually on Facebook and everything, and also the judge apps. Some of the judge candidates may not have judge apps accounts, but you all made it here. So
everyone who applied here has a
probably
judge apps
do.
account.
Yeah, you probably do. Generally, any announcements are made on the forums there as well.
So on Facebook, if you have a Facebook account, there's a page called Magic Judges on Facebook.
Yeah.
Like it. Don't unfollow it. Every time there's a major article or change, it will show up there. And have a read. They're quite interesting.
Yep, exactly. Yeah.
Two things. Just as a generalist point of view, anyone who's looking to get into a professional career or is in a professional career, it is expected that in those careers that you are keeping up with the journals, that you are keeping up with the science in some cases, and best practice. It's not unique to Magic. This is just something that anyone who's hoping to be a professional in the field should be keeping track of. The second thing is, just on a little note, there's a really good podcast, the JudgeCast. Every time there is changes to the IPG, they talk about it on there. Strongly recommend subscribing to it.
Yeah.
There's also the Australian and New Zealand Judge Slack, which if you're not currently a member of that, let me know and I shall have several people added to it after this conference. There are constantly discussions about any upcoming changes and the impacts they have running there at all times.
Yeah. So at the time of my first try at L2, I didn't know any about this. I just knew that sometimes just before release there would be an update, I would read it and kind of not really understand or how to implement it. Thankfully there are plenty of resources now available to judges, so every time an update or a change happens, there's plenty of others willing to break it down for us.
Cool.
This was also the time where I started to really question if I wanted to be an L2. Your journey to L2 doesn't always have to, end in being an L2. You know, you could try, find that it's not right for you, and then just be happy sitting at L1. Also, it shouldn't really get in the way of your life. Like, everyone has their own life to live, whether it be, you know, full-time study, full-time work, or any extenuating circumstances, such as your personal life. You know, things happen in your life that you can't really account for. I won't go into too much detail about, you know, what happens, but you know, if something does happen, don't feel so compelled to stick to your road, to stick to having to be an L2. It doesn't have to be the high priority. Okay. And at the time, there were plenty of L2s in the area, so I felt that if someone else could do what I wanted to do better, then why should I do it? And we talked about like the earlier discouragement of just failure in general. I'm of the impression that people should be congratulated for trying, but they should be scolded for failing. This gives the impression that what you do matters. Okay? It should matter what you do. And that leads into, essentially, my attempt at L2 number 2, Electric Boogaloo. So, my real fire to walk the road again happened by attending my first ever judge conference, which was only last year at GP Brisbane. It was also my first time learning from an L5/L3 in Riccardo Tessitore. Guy is fantastic at what he does. And being able to learn from other high-level judges, and it was basically just a huge opportunity to learn from L3s in general, or like judges that have been judging for 15 plus years. What I learned from that event, I don't think I could have ever learned anywhere else. Whether it be in my time constantly judging events or talking to other judges, there are just some things that you can really only learn from a judge conference. I've judged my first GP in Sydney, and getting the feedback from not only my other team members, but my team leader and the head judge about the areas that I needed to focus on. That was very important, especially, again, is generally my IPG is still letting me down a little bit, but I got quite a few recommendations on my tournament organization skills. So when doing a GP, there are lots and lots to be done, from just setting up tables, you know, as simple as that, to figuring out where the table numbers are going to be, how the events are going to be divided during the weekend, and also by meeting players that I'd never met before. You know, players that you would never come across unless you actually left your state, and carrying your skills over to there and being able to give your impression of how you judge, and getting feedback from people that I judge like for the first time but have been playing Magic for much longer than I had. Getting feedback from them was definitely a humbling experience. Also, when I came back, just the local community in general, I hadn't expected the general player base in Brisbane to want me to be an L2. Like, some of them wanted me to be an L2 more than I wanted to be an L2. And at first I didn't know how to take that. because like there are much better L2s that the pressure, and there are much better L2s than me. So why choose me? I think that comes back to Adrian's first talk about giving off setting up such an environment where people feel so welcome that they want you to continue doing better and better and better. And my passion for Magic hasn't died down in the least. So even after 5-6 years, I'm sure, again, Adrian, 22 years, it's just something that just never goes away.
You know, people figure out how old I am.
Yeah, right?
22.
Yeah, 22, cool. Let's go with that.
So the main thing I want everyone to take away from here, whether you be uncertified, whether you're an L1 or you're an L2, what will your road be? Does it only lead to L1? Are you happy just being an L1? Does it lead to being an L2? And what about L2 and beyond? Like, are you happy being an L2 or just wanting to strive for more for your community? Ricardo said something that'll stay with me, like probably for the rest of just my life in general. He said that if there isn't a road for you to walk on that someone else has paved for you, forge your own. If there is a will, you can find that way.
He's very wise.
He's very wise. Yeah, that's my story. Any questions?
And what was the first competitive event that you judged? And can you remember anything in particular that stood out as a scary moment or a challenging situation?
Yeah. The first, you never forget your first. So my first experience judging a Comp RL event was a GPT. Ming was actually the head judge. I was in the middle of watching one of the matches, and someone had missed the trigger, and I pointed out that trigger. And then the player called judge on me because I pointed out someone's trigger, which I really shouldn't have. So yeah, you really don't forget your first mistake like that in a high pressure situation. It was a very, very humbling experience. I apologized profusely. I had a stern talking to.
So did you get entered into the tournament and disqualified?
It's only a match loss.
It's only a match loss.
Oh, okay.
I don't actually remember, but I apologize profusely to the players. So,
0-1
yeah.
a tournament you're judging.
Yeah. Yep.
So, what kind of advice would you give to L1s now who are trying to become L2 to gain that experience? Because, as you said, GPTs are no longer the thing.
At the moment, I feel that the best way to gain the Comp RL experience would be to approach TOs or stores who are looking to hold Comp RL Magic events that aren't PPTQs, and let them know that you want to judge. Otherwise, you can approach either Jared or Johnny. Generally, these stores will go to the L2s first for judges, and then they will then, if they're available or not available, they may delegate down. Just put your hand up. Yeah.
Just beyond if they're already when the store's at the point where it's scheduling events, probably got a judge in mind or decided what it's going to do for judges. Just let them know that you'd like to judge events that are Comprel, because a store, basically nothing needs to be Comprel except for PPTQs now. So a lot of the times the store will be like, we'll just run it at regular because it's easier. But if you put your hand up and said, I would like to run some things at Comp, they're like, oh, well, maybe we can stretch to run this event at COP.
Yeah.
And they can factor that in, because usually by the time a store's, say, announced an event, it's announced prices, so it's factored in what it's going to be paying out anyway.
Yes.
So they can factor in a judge into that math beforehand.
I mean, as an example, we've got Boyd running our miniatures today. I don't think so.
Yes.
Just to follow up from the first question, what was your first event just judging at L2 like?
Oh, I haven't actually. Like, I'm still on my second road. Like, so this is from the perspective of someone who is walking that road.
Oh, okay. Right.
Yeah.
General tip, which I've been told by quite a few different judges, to advance to the next level. So if you're an L1 looking to become an L2, the best tip anyone can give you is be the best L1 you can be.
Yeah.
So pay attention to what is happening in the judge circles, like be updated on rules changes and policy changes, judge whenever you can,
And make yourself known to like all the stores.
Yeah, networking is part
networking
of
is
the,
definitely a
level
part
two
of it.
Judge, definitely. Just exposure, and
Yeah.
be a good judge,
Yeah,
Good
essentially
because-
build your brand.
Yeah,
Present
exactly.
yourself as like the product, like as the best product that you can.
Every L2 begins as a good L1.
Yeah.